What's happening, people? What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another player focus video that we're going to be doing here. Like I said previously on a previous video, I did mention that we're going to be doing some more player focus videos on the channel going forward. Um, so keep it locked here and make sure to like and subscribe. As I always say, as we're growing and your support is highly appreciated and encouraged for the channel. The player focus that we wanted to kind of touch on today is Bruno Fernandes. And this is important to talk about because yes, he's not an Arsenal player, but there is relevance to Arsenal. Why? Because Bruno Fernandes is currently on 19 assists in the Premier League, if I'm not mistaken, and he is one assist away from breaking the all-time record of assists in the Premier League in a single season, currently held by Kevin De Bruyne and Arsenal's very own Thierry Henry, a record 20 assists in a single season. Now, whilst De Bruyne and Thierry Henry currently hold that record for most assists in a single season, like I said, that the record is 20, Bruno Fernandes is on 19 people with a few games to spare, right? So with us being, about a month left in the Premier League, because we are in April, end of April currently, um, and we do have, let me just confirm here how many games we have, or I should just confirm how many games United has left. United has 4 games left in the Premier League. Yeah, United has 4 games left in the Premier League. So Bruno could easily break that record. He has 4 games to get 2 assists to break the record, right? Not just level it, but 2 assists will break the record. 1 assist will level it, 2 assists break the record entirely, where he becomes the player to hold the record for most assists in a single season. He just needs 2 more assists. Now that to me is crazy because, Thierry Henry held that record for a very long time, and then obviously relatively recently, um, De Bruyne leveled it. But yeah, like I said, Bruno Fernandes can pass our very own Thierry Henry, who holds that record, which is annoying, right? Obviously from an Arsenal standpoint, especially because it's a United player. Um, it also goes to show the quality of Thierry Henry, a striker in that position, right? Not even a midfielder. You think of the midfielders that played in this league, your Mesut Ozils, who almost broke the record, Cesc Fabregas, Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Yaya Torres, right? These David Silvas, these midfielders who graced the Premier League, none of them, were able to match or break Thierry Henry's record all those years ago. That Thierry Henry, I think, believe set in 2003. And the fact that a striker, not even a midfielder, like I said, holds that record is insane. It just goes to show the brilliance of Thierry Henry and how good he was, right? But if we're talking about brilliance now, right, we have to now talk about Bruno Fernandes, especially if he goes on to beat the record, because the context for him is that he's playing in a very poor, I say very poor, maybe not very poor. He's playing in my opinion, an average Man United side who needs a lot of work still. Man United is currently third in the Premier League. I did predict them to finish high this season and to get back in towards the top of the table, considering they were in the bottom half of the table last season. I expected them to be in the top half of the table this season simply because um, you know, they play 1 game a week, right? Out of all competitions early in the domestic cups and didn't have any European football. So it was expected that they're going to get back into Europe at least. So they're currently third in the Premier League. Um, but for me, like I said, still not a great side. Like, I mean, when they come back into the Champions League comes back into play, you know, they're going to need extra bit of quality. They're going to need extra bit of squad depth and players to help them manage that campaign, right? Playing once a week right now, yes, they have decent players in certain areas, but when you play once a week and you don't have, you can rest your players and you don't have much else to contend with, the squad that you have now should be able to get the job done. You are still Man United, so there are decent players there, right? Your Cunha's, your Mbeumo's, your Casemiro's, who's had a great season in his own right. Um, there's other good players around them, maybe a couple players in the back line who are decent. They brought in that Lamens in goal, who's decent. Um, but they still need building blocks around there. They're going to need to revamp their midfield next season. At least add some quality around it because Casemiro is leaving. Kobe Mainoo, I believe, just signed a new contract, if I'm not mistaken, but he's still in the ranks. Um, so he'll be there, but you're going to need quality around that. Ugarte is going to need to be replaced. That back line, like I said, is going to need some experienced, top quality around it if they're going to compete for major honors again. Because let's be honest, that's what Man U should be doing, right? Their fullbacks, probably going to need upgrading on as well. So they have pieces to work with. Like I said, your Cunha's and Buemos and Sesko's young as well. Um, but they're going to need a lot more work, let's be honest. So all that to say, Bruno's been playing, and for a long time now, Bruno has been the shining light for a poor, underwhelming, underperforming Man United team for years now, since he's joined way back when. Seems like he's been around forever now, Bruno Fernandes. But for the additional context of the fact that he's only won two major trophies at his time at Man United. Um, the two major trophies that he's won were the EFL Cup, which was the 2002-2003 season. Sorry, 2022-2023 season, and the FA Cup in 2023 and 2024 season. So one of the domestic cups each. He hasn't won a Premier League. He hasn't won a Champions League with Manchester United. So that goes to show a lot. That goes to show that again, the team around him has been underwhelming, underperforming. We all know Man U has not been run the greatest, and they haven't invested the greatest over the years. But Bruno has been a mainstay at a time where he could have left because let's be honest, we all call him rat face. We don't like him, especially as an Arsenal fan base. We don't like the guy, and sometimes even the way he carries himself on the pitch, he's a whiner, he's a complainer, he's a moaner. That's not the greatest look, especially if you're a captain, right? Which he is. He wears the armband, but he complains a lot. He whines a lot. He moans a lot at the referee, at other players. He's deemed to have a bad attitude. However, there's no denying his quality on the pitch, right? That's a guy that, regardless of how you feel about him on a personal level or whatever his characteristics and his mannerisms are, from the football perspective, he's the guy you want on your team. Let's not beat around the bush. I said it way back when I was talking to the other guys, Laurent and Merdad, and the three of us were talking about who the best number 10 is in the league, right? And I believe Merdad said Eze at the time, Laurent said Cole Palmer, and I said Bruno at the time, and that's look, in foresight now that's proved to be true. We watch football with our eyes. Bruno is not just the stats, right? Bruno is carrying and has been carrying a poor Man United team for years and years and years now, and he's having a brilliant campaign this time around. Some would say one of his best, especially if he goes on to break the record, right? The numbers speak for themselves. A clutch player who pops up with big goals and big assists for Man United and a player, like I said, who's probably the diamond in the rough for Man U at this moment in time, right? There's no questioning his heart and his will and ability to win. And like I said, despite the fact that he hasn't won any of the majors for Manchester United, winning just an FA Cup and an EFL Cup, um, but you can tell that's a character, somebody who has the character to win, and that's why I'm surprised he hasn't pulled, a Van Persie, for example. When Van Persie was at Arsenal and left to go to Man United, I'm surprised Bruno hasn't jumped ship to go to, a bigger club who's been winning things and just, ride the success of other teams, or what's another example I can give for my basketball fans, right? Kevin Durant to Golden State Warriors when he left OKC, if you can't beat him, join him kind of thing. Like, whilst we criticize those kinds of players, right? Your Kevin Durant's, your Van Persies. Um, for making those moves from teams, to go and jump ship to a winning, successful team already, an established team already. Whilst we criticize those kind of players, there's a level of understanding you have to have for those players because, they have short careers. They're maybe too good to not be winning things, and they want to go to teams that are winning things. So you see both sides of that. When you look at Bruno Fernandes, right? Again, I'm surprised that he's stayed as long as he has at Man United, who's been so poor, and pretty much the club around him has been letting him down. Because like I said, they haven't filled him with quality players to his level around him, right? He stands out, and he could have left, to maybe go to a more successful team, or could have down tools and wanted to leave, knowing his career is short. I do believe he's in his 30s now, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, knowing, as a professional footballer at the top level, you have a short career and, you have major trophies that you're going to want to win in that short period of time. And, so being in his 30s now, the fact that he hasn't won a Premier League or hasn't won a Champions League, that may be something that can go on to haunt him. Obviously he still has time in his career, but he hasn't done it with United. So, sticking around when you could have jumped ship a while back when you're that good and the team around you is well below your level, you could have understood him wanting to make a move. We'll see what happens with him going forward, but yeah, in the here and now, like I said, he's just been that one consistent and that constant for Man United, who's been showing himself as a winner. somebody with top level quality with his numbers and his overall play. And I think this season, we've really seen it. And I say this season, I mean mostly the second half of the season, because let's be honest, Ruben Amorim came in, um, and Ruben Amorim, pretty much was having him in the first half of the season. Amorim had him as a deep lying um, midfielder in a number two double pivot, right? And whatever crazy formation that Amorim was playing at the time. I think, playing wing backs, playing Ahmad as a right wing back, all this foolishness that he was doing, Ruben Amorim, didn't even have Kobe Mainoo in the team. Instead, he was playing Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes in a double pivot. And when you put Bruno Fernandes in a double pivot, you take away from his attacking qualities, and when you have to give him more defensive work to do, and he'll do it because that's the kind of player that he is. Um, take one for the team. Anything to win by all means necessary. He'll try and put in a defensive shift, but he's not that guy, right? You have more defensive responsibility when you play in a double pivot. Um, so that's not Bruno's you know role. That's not his main attribute. That's not where you're going to get the best out of him. So lo and behold, Carrick comes in and Carrick uses common sense and Carrick plays Bruno Fernandes in a more advanced number 10 position, higher up the pitch, right? Where he's where he's best, because you want a player who has end product and has GA output, and GA meaning goals and assists. You want a player like that closer to goal. You don't want him deeper in a deeper midfield role, where he has defensive responsibilities and he's further away from goal. You want him closer to goal where he can link up with the forwards, be that connection from midfield to the attacking link, get the ball to the forward players quickly. As we saw the other day, I watched the Man United Brentford game where they won 2-1. And in the first half, right, Bruno was pivotal to what they were doing going forward. And this is my frustration with Arsenal and what we don't do. Again, linking this back to an Arsenal connection here. What we don't do is we don't do well in transition, right? We don't get the ball from back to front quickly enough, and we don't make the right decision when we're on the transitions more often than not, right? The pass breaks down, we get the pass wrong, we delay the pass. And when I say we, the guys in question in these cases, oftentimes, your Martin Odegaard. We saw it just recently in our game against Newcastle, not playing Kai Havertz in when Kai Havertz is running in on goal. He has a one-on-one potential for a breakaway in the first half against Newcastle. Odegaard refuses to play him in. Same thing with similar thing with Gyökeres in the second half. Had a chance on the break to play Gyökeres in, refused to do it, and not the first time he hasn't played Gyökeres in a game this season, right? When Gyökeres had a chance for an opening and on goal. And again, he's not the only one in our side, but Odegaard, you have to compare because he's another quote unquote high profile player in a similar position to Bruno Fernandes, where you look at say, this is what we need in our team. And so bringing it back to Man United and Bruno Fernandes in the game against Brentford, right, their most recent game at the time of recording this, their second goal comes from, Bruno is higher up the pitch, right, because that's where he should be. So when Man United had won the ball, they got the ball to Bruno quickly, right? Bruno gets it, turns on the half turn, right? Now he's running a goal in open space. He wasn't picked up. Brentford had pushed guys forward, but Bruno was left higher up the pitch for the counter in transition. And again, they got the ball to him quickly. He turns, he's running with it. Now he's dribbling through midfield. Looks like he has all the time in the world. He could go left, could go right, delays it, patience, doesn't get trigger happy, makes the right play because he decides to go left, plays in Sesko, perfectly weighted pass into Sesko while the timing of the run was perfect, timing of the ball was perfect while Sesko was still onside, and Bruno plays him in, and then Sesko does the rest, and Sesko finishes. And that's exactly what you want to see, right? Again, I encourage you to go look at that goal if you haven't seen it. Second goal for Man United against Brentford, where, like I said, Bruno's driving through midfield, makes the play, makes the pass to Sesko, and Sesko does the rest. And that was his 19th assist of the season, Bruno Fernandes, with a couple games to spare. Um, and yeah, again, reluctantly, I'm watching that, saying this guy's going to break the record of the held by our guy, our GOAT. And fair play to him if he goes on and does it, because again, you know, forget the fact that he's been here for a few years now and the team around him has let him down. This season, just let's look at this season alone in isolation where his previous manager has let him down, right? And Ruben Amorim, sorry, playing him in a deeper position in a double pivot, and the guy still has managed 19 assists up to this point in the season. So I can only imagine he might have broken the record already if he was played in his proper position as a number 10. Um, you know, throughout the whole campaign. If he had started the campaign playing in his regular number 10, more attacking midfield position, where he should have been all along, and not just halfway through the season, then you're thinking that the record could have been broken already. Um, you know. So yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to think that that's where he is, and that's where Man United are at, and where would they be without him? We said that for years now. Where would they be without him? And this year especially is really showing it. Like I said, alongside the resurgence of a Casemiro, who's been brilliant in midfield as well under Carrick. But Carrick has come in and done common sense. And the biggest common sense approach that he took, he's not doing anything rocket science, but one of the biggest common sense approaches that Carrick has taken is putting Bruno Fernandes further up the pitch again and playing him in his better position as a more number 10, more attacking midfield position, closer to goal where he can damage the opposition and link up with the forwards. And you hear the likes of Sesko and Mbeumo and those guys come out and talk about how grateful they are to be playing with a player like Bruno and thankful for him because that's a striker's dream, that's a forward's dream. It's to play with a player who knows how to find you, knows where to find you, perfect way to pass, gets his head up and looks forward right away, not sideways, not backwards, not back to the goalkeeper for the goalkeeper to stand on the ball and be the one to make plays. No, Bruno gets the ball and his first instinct is to go forward, get his head up, whether it's spraying passes from range, whether it's short passing or just knowing when to play the ball first time or whether to take a couple touches and create space for himself, create time for himself, bring others into play. It's all these sort of things, right? That elite level footballers will have. It's the IQ. Um, and the thing with Bruno is he's not the most skillful of players, right? He's not going to do what, let's look at the Champions League, for example. He's not going to do what Kvara and Elise can do on the ball, where he just skips past two, three players with skill, drops a feint and step overs and Maradonas and Cruyff turns. He doesn't do that kind of stuff, Bruno, but he's tidy on the ball. He's secure on the ball. Doesn't need to dribble past anyone. But it's his end product. Just give him the ball in dangerous positions in the final third, and he will make something happen. He will damage your back line, whether it's through a line breaking pass, whether it's through splitting your defense, a ball over the top into the channels, or a goal from range himself, right? Or even a goal from the penalty spot. Bruno Fernandes is clutch for Man United when it really counts. He is. We hate to say it, but it's the truth. It's the truth. And so we would love a player like that in our team, someone who's more direct. You would think that a player like that will get the best out of a Gyökeres, to be honest with you. So yeah, let's see. Maybe Eze can be that guy for us going forward, if we start using him correct. But there's what it is. And when Bruno Fernandes, you know, again, whilst he's not the most brilliant, flashiest of footballers, again, even in Eze, right? Eze has more guile and skill on the ball than Bruno Fernandes. Let's be completely honest about it, right? But I think Eze's got to, he's not too far behind, but he's got to prove that level of same level of consistency in terms of end product and output and match winning ability, and clutch gene, which he can do, Eze, right? Like I said, he has more time on his side to prove that. This was his first season at Arsenal at a bigger club from Palace, right? Let's see if he can continue to go on and do that for us, Eze, and he'll have a big say in the run in too. So there's that, right? Um, but yeah, you know. Just had to put in a word for this player focus on Bruno Fernandes for a second. Where does he rank amongst, some of United's best midfielders of all time? And he won't necessarily maybe get the accolades he deserves because, again, he hasn't won a Premier League or a Champions League with Man United. But certainly he'll be high up in United fans and the club's ratings and rankings because of what he's done on an individual level. Maybe it didn't lead to the successes that a club of Man United stature should be lifting, but again, from an individual level, what he's doing despite the team around him, the underwhelming team around him, the inconsistency of management, the poor management, you have to give credit where credit is due. Is he your player of the season? Let me know. Bruno has a shout to be player of the season. A lot of people think that player of the season should go to the team that wins the league. And I understand that case, but again, the player of the season is an individual award, right? It's not team of the season. The team of the season will win the Premier League, in terms of the best team that season. But player of the season is for an individual, and you have to really look at an individual and what they're doing for that team. Um, to give them a proper shout, I believe, of winning that accolade, right? So player of the season, right? There's a few players to contend with. City fans are saying if City go on to win the Premier League, um, Bernardo Silva, funny enough, his fellow Portuguese, compatriot there, compadre there. Yeah, if Bernardo Silva, if the City go on to win the league, Bernardo Silva, for his displays, in the clutch down the stretch, Bernardo Silva could win and deserve player of the season. Nico O'Reilly, they say as well. Um, from an Arsenal perspective, you're looking at maybe someone in the back line, or Declan Rice had a shot once upon a time, but Declan Rice has been fading recently. Um, but yeah, there could be a few contenders there. But let me know what you guys think. I mean, do you think the player of the season should be, in the team that wins the league, or are you looking at strictly the individual and their performances throughout that season and throughout that campaign, like a Bruno Fernandes to say, whilst you haven't, won the major titles in England, um, which Man United, they're going to go on to not win anything this season. Whilst you haven't won anything or haven't won the Premier League as an individual for your team, your contributions have been major enough to, you know, be recognized for breaking individual records, right? So, yeah, from Bruno's standpoint, that's where he's at. The award that he could win for Player of the Season could be based on the fact that he's going to break a record that has stood for, you know, over 20 years now, I suppose, in the case of Thierry Henry, initially setting the standard for the assist record in a single season. So if Bruno goes on to break that, we're looking at a big individual record and accolade, that stood for, what, 20 years or so. So let us know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think. Get in the comments and give us your thoughts and share a little bit of what the season is looking like for you and how you think it'll conclude, not just with player of the season, but in the title race as well. It's been your boy CJ from the Gunners Corner. And remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Later.